black armband. The school threw him out of school. Case went to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, that's a bit much. That really wasn't hurting anybody, so you can't do that. Kids have a right to speak too. Well, Fourth Circuit said, you guys should have read the Tinker case. And they said, by the way, the seal of the state of Virginia has a woman with her foot on top of some guy with a spear. And that's all over every document. Not only that, but the high school associated with this school is the Sabres, and they have crossed sabers on all their shirts. You better throw them out. And by the way, there's a university, the University of Virginia. The University of Virginia has two muskets crossed on their symbol. And not only that, but your school is named after Jack Jowett. And let me tell you about Jack Jowett. Patrick Henry was in terrible danger, and Jack Jowett was a member of the militia of the state of Virginia, and he went running to notify Patrick Henry that the British were coming, and you know what happened? They made him a hero, and they gave him 2 pistols as a reward for saving Patrick Henry. This is all in the case. And the United States Circuit Court of Appeals says, you got some problems here, you're out of business. And so it's to determine how much the school is going to pay this kid, but he's going to be in pretty good shape for a long time. And I have now run off at the mouth too long, and I'm going to quit talking. Thank you for being such a great audience.
One question, it's on the Second Amendment.
Sure.
But I'm supposed to tell you Drew Burhan said hi.
Oh, my goodness.
We get going.
Des Moines cop, great guy.
Yes. With respect to a lot of the gun laws that have passed, the Brady Bill, I'm not really sure, some of the other ones that passed right after the Columbine issue, and things like that, where they're making it harder for legal law-abiding people to own guns, and not necessarily making it harder for the illegal criminals to get their hands on the guns and stuff that are around. What are some of the things that the NRA specifically and other civil rights organizations and stuff, are they trying to get some bills and things going that are repealing some of this stuff, or what are some of the current acts that are going on to help protect our Second Amendment and our rights to own and bear arms?
Like most civil rights organizations, the first thing you do is try and stop bad things from happening. And when bad things happen, then you try to go either with the courts or with legislatures to try and roll them back. And if that doesn't work, then you do referendums and other things. But the attacks are all about the same. It doesn't matter too much whether it's search and seizure or whether it's civil rights involving racial minorities or whatever it is. The attacks are about the same. They try to make it difficult for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. If it's voting, they make it expensive for you to vote. They make red tape for you to vote, if you think back to the history in that context. And that's true of just about anything where someone wants to use government as a vehicle to invade. There's a sort of a model, and that has to do with adding red tape and making it very expensive and difficult for you to do the thing that you want to do. In the case of the Second Amendment, own a gun. So when we see those things, and there's a pattern, but that pattern goes through any action by government. If they don't want you to smoke, they make cigarettes more expensive. And it's not a civil right to smoke, but it's still the same pattern. Make it more expensive, harder to get. Start clipping out the more garish things that are done, like smoking in places that annoy other people, which seems reasonable. And with guns, it's the same thing. They make it harder to find a place to shoot, harder to own a gun, more expensive to own a gun. Take certain guns and try and demonize them and say they're bad and this one's good and then this one's bad and another one, and gradually push you down in a corner. The big purpose is always to have fewer and fewer gun owners. 80 million gun owners are too many to manage politically, because you can make a huge, huge difference if you get them mad. If you don't get them mad, they stay home or they vote other interests. But if you get them mad, big deal in the election, as you can imagine, with 80 million. Yes?
In your opinion, where do we draw the line between a legal gun and an illegal gun?
Well, that's an interesting constitutional question that I'm not a big expert on, but the general description that most modern scholars adopt is that there's a general difference between crew-served guns and individual guns. If you go back to the beginnings of the Constitution, the kind of guns that were owned by the people, the militia, which were organized militia, unorganized militia, the whole debate about standing armies and everything is pretty clear on what they meant by a militia, which was the people in general that were able to be called up to defend the city, the county, the state, whether it was a disaster or a military maneuver or whatever it was. And the traditional guns that were owned by individual people were pistols, rifles, and shotguns, just exactly like today, not cannon, and of course they didn't have airplanes and things of that nature. So that's really the best description I can give you. Now, the whole business about machine guns and assault weapons has been a trick of those that want to ban guns. Machine guns have been banned in America since about 1932. There were a series of laws, 32, 34, and 35, that effectively banned machine guns. And there's an argument. There's some people that say you ought to be able to own machine guns and some that don't. NRA has not injected itself into that argument. We're particularly interested in semi-automatics, regular guns, pistols, rifles, and shotguns that people really own. In order to take the next bite of the apple, though, the people that want to ban guns have said that semi-automatic guns should be banned. Semi-automatic gun, I assume everybody understands. A machine gun, you hold the trigger down, and it goes brrr, keeps shooting bullets, right? A semi-automatic, you pull the trigger once, it shoots once. You pull the trigger again, it shoots again. And that's a semi-automatic. Well, they have been around since before 1900 and have been commonly owned by Americans. They are semi-automatics, ironically, particularly rifles, are mostly owned by competitors that shoot rifle matches and veterans. The vast majority of them are owned by those two categories of people. They're owned by veterans because since the time of the Revolutionary War, when people have gotten out of the military, they have traditionally wanted to buy a copy of the gun that they used when they were in the military. And those guns have been made very, very popular over the years. You hear about 30-06s and things like that. Well, those calibers became popular because they were used by the military. Millions and millions of World War II veterans bought M1 Garand rifles, semi-automatic, not a machine gun, a semi-automatic rifle, for example. Literally millions of people in World War I bought the rifle called the 03A3, a 30-06 bolt-action rifle. It was the common ordinary rifle used in World War I. And you can go back through the Craig Jorgensen and rifles all the way back to George Washington's time. Moving up to today, the rifles that the military had used turned somewhere in the 60s, turned into machine guns. The AR-15, which is the military calls the M16. Well, a civilian version of that gun was made at the same time and is still made, called the AR-15. It's semi-automatic, not a machine gun. And soldiers, just like all of those that have always existed, get out of the Marine Corps, they get out of the Army or the Air Force or somewhere, and a lot of them, literally millions of them, will buy one of those guns. Nostalgia, they use them for hunting, they use them for all kind of things. And so that's the traditional reason. They are almost no crime committed with those guns. But you see, here's the thing, here's the trick. They'll go on television and they'll show a machine gun being shot, and then they'll talk about the assault weapons ban, which has nothing whatsoever to do with machine guns. The point of the thing is to scare you into thinking, well, that goofy NRA and that goofy Chuck Grassley and all these Congressman Latham and Congressman Nussel and Boswell and all these people, they want everybody to have machine guns. It has nothing to do with machine guns at all. It's a trick because the guns look alike. It's a great propaganda trick, but they are not the same. They have nothing in common whatsoever. Almost no crime committed by them, typically owned by veterans and some number of competitors. About 12,000 shooting tournaments in America, and almost every shooting tournament uses those kind of guns. Yes, ma'am.
You shared the number of people killed in gun accidents.
Right.
I'd be interested in your definition of a gun accident and how you would classify those people killed by guns in Des Moines
Well,
accident?
I was have a disadvantage in that I was in Texas all week, and I know there was a career criminal that was killed in a gunfight with another career criminal. Remember the Drake Diner murders? One of the guys killed was his partner, the murderer's partner, and so they got in a gunfight with one another. They were not kids, and it certainly wasn't an accident. That was a murder.
And there was a 16-year-old young man who evidently was suspected of killing two adults.
Is that the guy that went to Colorado and killed himself? I saw that in the paper somewhere, yeah.
So is that an accident?
It's not an accident, no.
So what is an accident?
Well, an accident is, I think, pretty easy for most people to identify. It's an unintentional act. Accidents are what Americans for Gun Safety, the big anti-gun organization operating here, tell you kills 30,000 people a year in the United States when they lie to you. An accident is an unintentional act. It's, let's say a little child is playing with a gun, or I'm got my gun and I'm monkeying with it and I shoot you by accident. That's an accident. That's the way police departments report it, and that's where the National Safety Council gets their figures. So a police officer in every one of those cases has made a determination that the death that's reported, or the injury, if you're looking at injury statistics, was an accident as opposed to an intentional act. An accident would make a great deal of difference. You would know the difference if you got in an accident with your car on the way home. If you were charged with vehicular homicide, that would not be an accident. That would mean that you either intentionally or recklessly ran into somebody and killed them. If you had an accident, you slid on the ice here or something like that and ran into somebody and they were tragically killed, that would be an accident. So there's a big difference. One you go to jail for, the other is just a tragedy. But the truth is that there are very, very few accidents. Now, if career criminals, like the partner of JoJo White, the guy that did the Drake Diner murder, goes and murders somebody, why would we want to take away my gun or your gun because somebody committed a murder? That doesn't seem like good logic. If you apply that to everything, we wouldn't have very much in America. Gun accidents are way down near the bottom of other things. And so the strange thing is, we wonder why, since more people are killed in swimming pools, ladders, all kind of things, why is it that there's not a move to get rid of ladders and swimming pools and all those other things? Guns. It's the cultural war. It has to do with guns. It's the 80 million people that sort of coalesce around that are the object of the affections of the anti-gun people. It doesn't have much to do with the accidents themselves. If it does, how do you reduce 1 to 0 here in Iowa? How would you do that? I mean, what program would it be? Yes, ma'am.
Talk to me about the big picture, how you perceive this cultural war.
Oh, I think that's a pretty well-known deal. It's the NASCAR people and the elitists. There's so many ways of describing it. It's Iowa, but not everybody in Iowa. New York, California. There's all kinds of. Everybody in America is talking about a cultural war. If nobody here is, I'm sorry, but the rest of the country is. Read Zell Miller's book. Zell Miller's got Senator Miller from Georgia, who's a Democrat. He's got a great book out. The whole book is about the cultural war. It's about that business right there. It's about elitist people that want to make a standard operating procedure for life. Tell everybody how to run everything to eat, everything to do, what kind of cars to drive, everything that they should do in their lives, and the rest of the people that want to be left alone. That's one way of describing it. One of the characteristics of one side of this is that they love to make standard operating procedures for life. They don't want me to drive my Suburban. Fine, and they have a right to do that. I'm not taking away their right. They don't want me to have a gun. Those are all characteristics. Well, I want to have a gun. I want to drive a Suburban. There's cultural war. And we can go, there are all symptoms of it. We don't get into anybody's head. We don't know what's in anybody's heart, but we can see the symptoms and the actions of people. They're not wrong and right. It's just life. It's just the way it is. There's nothing wrong with being on any side of this. But it is there. And there are people that would be so revolted by going to a NASCAR race, some of them would get physically ill. There are people that would be so revolted at going to the Pioneer Gun Club and watching people shoot that their skin would crawl. Well, they're probably on one side of the cultural war. It's their right. I'm not complaining. But there is a difference. And some people have described it, and this is way, way too broad, as the blue states and the red states. Obviously, it's not that simple. But many people, not me, but many people have described it that way. It's not Republican-Democrat, because the Democrat that drives a truck isn't the same as the one that's the college professor at Harvard. There are differences. Of course, even the college professors at Harvard are different. There are people on both sides of all these things. So anytime you make a generality, it's replete with many exceptions that don't follow. But it's very difficult to communicate unless you make some kind of generality. Yes, sir.
Well, I know you were chairman of the Republican Party for a couple of years. I'm got a couple of questions. In lieu of campaign finance reform, the Patriot Act, and the ban on Homeland Security rifles, as I call them, coming up here in September to be renewed. If President Bush renews the ban on Homeland Security rifles, why should I, as a conservative, as a gun owner, as a constitutionalist and an NRA member, continue to support President Bush? And the second question is, there's a lot of union members who are also gun owners. How do you think the Republican Party should go about making inroads into the unions and start breaking up some Democratic coalitions?
I don't know about the Republican Party, and I'm here with a different hat on. I can tell you, as far as NRA is concerned, our membership is about like the electorate in Iowa. It's almost exactly like it. A third Democrat, third Republican, a third that don't identify with a party at all. And that's pretty much true of what we know about the 80 million gun owners. They appreciate all this is done with polling, and direct polling shows about 65 million gun owners, but everybody, Zogby and the others, will read into that it's an extremely underreported question to answer. You can imagine if somebody calls your home and says, do you own a gun? The likelihood of you answering that in a forthright way is about the same as if they call and say, are you gay, or are you a communist, or are you a member of a religious sect that might be unpopular or popular but unusual, or are you a Maharishi, or, it's not a very good polling question. So as a result, if you look at that and then you look at buying patterns and magazines and all the other things, comes out to about 80 million. Well, they're divided pretty equally. They tend, in the past few elections, to have voted presidential-wise Republican because the presidential candidates were very polarized on the issue of guns. But in the legislatures, it's not particularly that way. Here in the Iowa legislature, for example, there have been many Democrat leaders. Wally Horn, for example, from Cedar Rapids, was the Democrat leader in the Senate, a life NRA member. So there is a complete mixture in the Iowa legislature, for example. You find friends on all sides of the aisle, and as well as anti-gun people. So I can't answer your question. I'm not going to tell you what to say about George Bush. My prediction is that it will not get to his desk. It will be stopped in the House. The Senate, it would be filibustered, I'm sure, if it got to the Senate, because there's a pretty good majority that would not want to see it passed in the Senate this time. And so I don't think that extension is going to be found anywhere. Plus, there is no extension. There's no such thing, first of all, as an extension. Secondly, the bills that have been introduced about we're talking about the Clinton gun ban, the ban on certain kinds of semi-automatics, not machine guns, semi-automatic.
Some muzzle brakes and stuff like that?
Yeah, if you had a muzzle brake on them and you've got a pistol grip and some things, it's all cosmetic stuff. But nevertheless, the ban will almost certainly not be renewed, but there is no bill to renew it. There are about 4 bills, all of which ban many more guns and do many more things. And they use those things as a Christmas tree. Like, yeah, we all do that. If there's a bill in the legislature, you hang your Christmas ornaments on it. That's not unusual. However, if you're trying to stop a bill, that's always great when the other guy hangs Christmas tree ornaments on it. Because every ornament that's added, you build up, 4 more enemies in the legislature. Okay, I think we're probably getting near an end, but yes, sir.
Who specifically do you feel are some of the more dangerous lawmakers in terms of gentlemen's rights?
Well, that's it. I wouldn't use those terms. I mean, people have a right to have their positions, and we try not to put things in those terms. But the people that lead the legislation are Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein and Lautenberg and people like that. But they come from states where that's popular. They're representing their constituency, and they have a right to do that. And we have a right to oppose it. So it's not I don't cast it in terms of people that you should hate or people you should love. It's not that way.
Hey, if anybody wants to ask him a question personally,
Thank you.
there's a reception over here, and if anyone, one more round of applause.